Hello and welcome back to the review board. Today we are going to be talking about The Creator, a very interesting movie, largely talking about AI and how it fits into the future and the dangers of both its integration and maybe its rejection on a societal level. I would say they spend a lot of time focusing on a more cinematic approach, something a bit more artsy with a production focus. Um, Definitely a kind of drama action movie, but less of a focus on kind of traditional filmmaking aspects through the acting and storytelling aspects. I think they definitely spend a lot of time keeping it very clean and sort of enjoyable visual scapes and environments that really kind of helped ground the movie in the location and the future, helping it feel relatable and certainly connected with current times. So let's take a look at the casting. I think there wasn't really anybody who stood out to me in the casting. And there certainly wasn't a memorable level to me that I thought that anybody couldn't be replaced. Which, while I suspect that this may have been a deliberate choice, certainly in certain elements, I'm not sure it was necessarily the right choice. And so immediately what that means is that we're looking at the lower end here. It's definitely not reaching the highs of 4. I don't think there was anybody, well, the main problem that I have is that I felt like the people who were in the supporting cast roles kind of overshadowed the primary cast in a way. And I do think that's what they were trying to do to a certain extent, but I do think it detracts in some elements by doing that. So I think it's right on the cusp here. So I do think we are going to put it in as a 3 for the time being, but it's kind of just sneaking in there because there were some elements that didn't work. And in fact, I think to be fair, because it's the smaller end of the stick, in fact, yeah, I think we do need to be fair because the casting is on a smaller scale. We have to, otherwise nobody's going to be at the bottom end of that scale. So it is unfortunate. I do think it kind of, those choices are making them suffer a little bit, and I really do get the feeling they were choices, but I feel that that's right. Moving into the production. Now, there's certainly a lot to talk about here because, as I say, this is where I feel they spent a lot of their time and effort and what they were targeting you towards. They were definitely trying some new things, and I personally really like that. And I think that there are more people who should reach out of those comfort zones of the production value that a movie can give you to achieve that. However, there were some elements that felt unnecessary. I think that in that trying to break out in certain areas, they achieved it very well in the overall cinematic feel, in how cleanly they delivered something that isn't real in that grounded reality, which is a very tricky balance and felt really good. But certain elements, like, essentially tried to break the movie up into chapters, which is nice. I like the idea of it. But do I think it really added anything? Or I feel like as they moved towards the end of the movie, it was something that was abandoned. It wasn't tied into the same level like they had done before, which meant that you're left with this question, why are those parts there if it's not delivering the same emphasis all the way through? So overall, it's strong, it's interesting, and it's achieving something unique really well. But in that breaking new ground, they're struggling to find purpose in everything that they're doing. I don't want to punish that too hard, because I feel like you have to reward the trailblazers, because otherwise why would anybody do it? And I do think that it's relatively fair. So we are looking at the top. I think that we are above 8, because like I said, it's strong and there are some exceptional features. I think it falls short of that 10 mark because there's a few elements that don't work. Well, it's not even that they don't work, it's that they're not 100% tied into what it is that they're doing enough to give it the impact that they're trying to do. And so I think we're looking at that 9, which speaks to how good it is. And I think that is worth it, because overall through the whole movie, that overriding theme is delivered really nicely, and it's just easy on the eyes, and that makes it an enjoyable watch. Into the script. It's going to be hard to move some elements of the script away from the production, because that's what they wanted. Some elements of the script's movement and how the story continues through an arc, they really tie it to that production, and that is a conscious choice. That is what they wanted to do. However, if you look at that from a script writing standpoint, just looking at the script on its own, that's relatively poor narrative determinism. But that's just one element. Overall, the overarching theme is delivered well. And you certainly cannot deny the subtlety in the real world elements that they are talking about and drawing from. And that's powerful. That's always going to be powerful. And any movie that can do that, and we should always be trying to do that, because at the end of the day, that's part of why we make things, is to look at our culture and our society, was really good. there is definitely a complexity element. And I think they fell into the complexity trap a little bit. So what that means is, what that looks like, is that there's going to be a few cases where going through the movie, you're maybe going to feel a little bit lost. And you're going to feel like, well, is that the past? Is that the present? Why are they telling me this information now? Is this relating to something? And while generally the slow revealing of information is common and useful, and certainly an appropriate tool to build you up to the reveal, you don't want it to be so much that you get lost. It wasn't quite there, but because of the complexity of the elements, they had a lot of subplots that were kind of tying in, and that was to do with the character's past, that was to do with the other elements of why they were there, and this comes back to that idea that I was talking to you about before. Some of the primary actors were lost in the secondary actors. And so what it felt to me like they're doing with the script is they are supplementing the delivery that the actors need to be giving you with more information within the script itself. These scenes that are telling you things, these deliveries. And that's not good, because sometimes you need it from the actors, not from the story. And so while the overarching theme is good, the delivery of the subtext is great, exceptional even, these two underlying parts are not good. So the way they're moving the story along, that small detail is on the poor side. And the delivery of information, because they're taking it away from the actor when it should just be acting. And that's down to, again, the casting and the acting, because the casting it's not where it needs to be. The person isn't memorable for the part, and so the person isn't therefore delivering everything that he needs to be delivering. Now, whether that's because they're trying to force you to do that with the script and not giving the actor enough room to do that, or whether that's because the actor doesn't have enough presence to achieve that, we don't know, and we can't tell that. But we can tell from watching it that that's missing. And so that is what is affecting the script. So that puts us in a tricky position. Realistically, we would be looking at a 16 or a 17 because of these good elements that I'm telling you about, because the overall story is good and it's got this subtext that's kind of exceptional. But because of this overarching push of how the movie's delivered, and because of the kind of over-delivering on information because of the complexity of the movie, that's pulling it down again. And so I'm not willing to give it more than 15, and I think, to be fair, it should really be in the 14. And that feels quite harsh for something that's good, but is it too harsh? We're going to put it at 15 for the moment. We'll see how I feel about that. I'm going to mull it over in my mind. it's either 15 or 14. I think it is just reaching that 15 category because it's unfair to let the minor points affect too heavily on the primary point of the script, and that is that it's a success. The script is a success, and even the things that they're doing within the script are success, but these minor points are pulling it back a little bit. So yeah, we're going to leave that at 15 for the minute. So now that we've talked about how these other parts are affecting it, let's try and look at that within the acting itself. And we're going to have to, I think, break this down in a complex way, because there's definitely some unusual elements here. The primary actors, they had this relationship, and it was very slow to develop, and it was very slow to connect to the audience. But it did get there. And that contribution means that at the beginning, as it's getting into things, you're like, why do I care about this? Is it enough for me? You know, am I connecting to this? And then at the end of the movie, you're like, wow, you know, this is sad. This is a very complex moment, and I want certain things from it. So it speaks to a success. But you have to weigh that up with the pieces that are missing. So, we've got character development. We've got chemistry because of that relationship. But we do have parts that are missing. And so what that does is, especially in the finale, so we'll talk about it in the finale, there was a few moments leading up to that kind of emotional peak where you're invested and you're like, this is sad. Right in that build up to that moment before that happens, there's this other moment where you're left thinking, why are they doing this? Why are the actors making this choice? Now you could argue that's the script. The script has been written that they're going to do this. And so if you're unsure why are they doing it, it's a failing of the scriptwriter, that the scriptwriter hasn't written something that's convincing enough for you to happen. And while that's certainly true in some cases, I'm not sure that it is true in this case. I don't think that it is a problem with the script. And that's why I've said separating out where the problem is important here, because we've talked about the issues of the script. What I think it is an issue of the actors. That the actors have delivered the emotional performance in one piece that's left you with an understanding and a feeling of why they're upset and why that's happening. But in another place, they haven't given you these other emotions, their connection to the other people, the feelings of loyalty, their feelings of this thing, they have to do it because they have no other choice in their own mind to do this. Is that because they're a child and so they're not thinking about things? Is that because the main guy, has got to see that person again? That's what's missing. They haven't given you that for you as the audience member to know that, and that is in their acting, not in the script. So, what does that look like from a scoring perspective? And as I say, it's difficult because of these pieces that worked and these pieces that don't work. We are not hitting the 50 category. We are not. There's no high complex emotions because, as we've talked about, they're delivering one things, they're not delivering others. That's the complexity. So we know we can straight away cut out these two top brackets. So then we're coming down into these next two brackets. We've talked about some good moments, but we've talked about what's missing. So what that means is that we're looking somewhere between the two of these. Handling and group dynamics was there. And as I say, the supporting characters kind of stole the show in certain moments because that supporting cast was strong. And in some ways, that detracts a little bit because they're overshadowing your main characters because they're delivering the emotions that you need, while the primary cast isn't quite giving you what you want. You know, there's a very sad moment where they had to let go of that secondary character who had been with you for a long time. In fact, right from the beginning, actually, they kind of come in and out, and they'd got you to where you needed to be, and then we had to let go of them, and that was emotional, and that was because they had done a good job of keeping you invested in them and their changes throughout the whole movie, and that's a very well done thing. So it detracts from it a little bit when you're getting what you need from the people who aren't where you want all of your attention to be, and not getting everything that you need from the people where your attention is, you see? So I think we're looking at 44 or 45. Right on this cusp. I think we're going to give it 45 just simply because of the success of the supporting cast. And I think we have to respect it in both sides, because the supporting cast for the good guys, as it were, and the supporting cast of the villain and their cast were actually really good. And I really rated their delivery. And so I think we've got to pay them their respect and bump that up a little bit. 45. So, a really interesting movie. Certainly not what you're expecting, because on the one hand, you're getting these elements that are really good and really creative and certainly a lot more than what you would expect from a traditional movie, but also these pieces that are missing. And maybe not everybody would notice that. Maybe if you're not looking for them and you just enjoy the movie as a movie, you don't necessarily feel all of that. And that's a good thing. But when you're breaking it down and you're looking into it, you've got to treat it all the parts and see what's there and what's not. And certainly, the more you put it under a microscope, the more I feel those parts are missing. So let's see where it stands. So 45, 50, 60, 69, 71. Interesting. Okay. 71. So let's have a look at our categories over here. It means that it is not quite broken into something really memorable, but we are in the good category. So, a good film. I think, despite everything, I would recommend it. I did enjoy it. I think I liked the way they handled certain things, and I liked the way they kind of make you feel with those creative choices that they made throughout the movie. And that's good to have a movie that evokes those kind of feelings while you're watching it, and that it's actually achieved what it set out to do by doing that. But I wouldn't go into this movie thinking to yourself, this is going to rock my world or be something life-changing. That's for sure. Yeah, definitely nice to see how it compares with our last review. It's certainly not in the same category. I would say that's for sure. But I do think that we're looking in the right end here. Okay, well, I'm interested in if you guys watched it, how you felt about it too. Let me know. Feel free to put in the comments what movie you think I should review next, and subscribe to see our next review, see how it goes. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.